All right, guys, back here on Southeastern 14 with Max Barr, and we are previewing the next round, which Alabama has advanced. They took it to Charleston 109-96 in their first round game in the 4-13 matchup. And then, of course, Grand Canyon got the 75-66 win over St. Mary's. So we're going to preview that matchup as we do with all SEC teams here at Southeastern 14. Not many left, so we're going to enjoy these while we can. But before we do that, we're going to tell you about something else you can enjoy, and that is our friends at Bet Online, because the tournament, as you know, is here. Bet Online, your bracket headquarters for the season. The best bracket contest out there, odds, lines, info on every game, every round, right up until the national championship. You can access the most up-to-the-minute wagering information anytime from your desktop or mobile devices, and even track your bracket in real time all the way through the tournament. So head on over to Bet Online today. Get in on the action. Remember, use that promo code BELIEVE, BLEAV, for your 50% off welcome bonus on your first deposit. Bet Online, the game starts here. All right, so the Crimson Tide, Max, as we mentioned in our live stream we did on Saturday morning, they look like the old Alabama in the game against Charleston. They cruised to a victory. Like I said, if you didn't watch the game, don't let the 13-point decision kind of fool you here. This game was completely out of hand. Alabama was up 30 with about 8 minutes to go. And so they were a well-oiled machine offensively again, which is what we expect from Alabama. They got everybody back. As you mentioned, too, Latrell Wrightsell is back in the fold, and he makes a huge difference in terms of their perimeter scoring. He went 5 of 6 from 3 in that game against Charleston. But, of course, it all starts with Mark Sears, one of the best players in the country. And, you know, to start with Alabama, Max, I mean, this was – if you're Grand Canyon and you're looking up, you're saying, man, I'd have loved to play Alabama a week or two ago, because if they're able to play like this, and if they can build off the momentum of having everybody back available after going through a bit of a stretch there where they had some injury woes, this is the kind of Alabama team that can make it not only difficult for Grand Canyon, but they can make it difficult for the next couple teams in their path potentially to a Final Four.
Yeah, this is the team. This is the team that we were saying is very dangerous. I'm just gonna, because when they're playing like this, when they've got every guy available and they've got that rotation of guards, and I think Wrightsell is really. I mean, we're not gonna say enough good about Sears and Estrada. If you've been following, if you're just watching now, we've been the old Mark Sears disrespect. It hasn't happened over here. It has not happened. So that is already established. Wrightsell, him being healthy, Blake, you gave out the stat about Alabama's shooting woes that kind of dipped down, and I think a huge portion of that can be the Wrightsell injury. Now there's other stuff that goes into it, just kind of natural variance of the season. But we saw the team that we've been seeing all year against Charleston, over 50% from three. That's exactly the game you want. And I said in our reaction Saturday morning, I said, this is exactly the type of first game you wanted, where your players aren't stressed at all. Mark Sears plays 32, Estrada plays 30. No one else really has to play many minutes. You'll be fresh and healthy, ready to go, and you get a great look at Grand Canyon in their game against St. Mary's. Now, looking at the matchup, there is one thing that is just like almost punching me in the face through the computer. It's jumping out at me so hard, Blake. Free throws and more free throws. If you have not watched Grand Canyon this year, guys, I've watched them. I watched them coming in a little bit, but I went back and I watched a lot of their games. I watched that whole St. Mary's game. This team, if you thought Texas A&M attacks and tries to get to the free throw line, oh my Lord. Guys, now I'm talking point distribution, so this is percentage of your total points. Grand Canyon, when you separate it, 3-pointers, 2-pointers, and free throws, they rank 281st in points from threes. They rank 257th in points from twos, 4th in points from free throws, 4th nationally. That's not in the conference. Nationally, only 3 teams in the country get more of their points from free throws. And there's one thing Alabama struggles with a little bit defensively. It's defending without fouling. Now, flip that, Blake. Grand Canyon has not seen the Alabama offense, nowhere even near it. So you've got an angle on both sides where you have a little bit of an edge. What are you seeing here?
Well, I'm glad you brought that up because Grand Canyon shot, what was it, 36 free throws, I think, maybe, if my tab would load here. Yeah, they went
They
28 of
live at the free
36.
throw line. They live there.
28 of 36. So here was going to be my comparison. If you're an Alabama fan, you have to look at Grand Canyon like an SEC team because of the way they get to the free throw line. And here's why. Because Arkansas, fifth in the country in free throws attempted per game, 26, right? Florida, sixth in the country in free throws attempted per game, 25.2. Grand Canyon, seventh, also at 25.2, right there with Florida. And Texas A&M, by the way, is at ninth at 24.3. They get to the line like an SEC team. And so that could be concerning for Alabama, like you mentioned, for all those kind of different reasons. I feel like, half the SEC is in the top 25 nationally in free throw attempts. So it really is. Now that I go down the line here, I'm like, okay, you keep going. Auburn was 21st. Alabama's 32nd. So Georgia's 37th. Like, look how many SEC teams in the top 40 in free throw attempts. So you mentioned Alabama playing without fouling is going to be really important here because something Grand Canyon does have too, and this is where, remember the contrast. We talked yesterday about how, everybody for Alabama got in on the action. Even when it wasn't a blowout, you saw the big men step up a little bit, right? And we said going to this game, Alabama could have an advantage because finally they're going to play a team, that's not going to have the SEC type big men. And it proved that way. The thing about Grand Canyon is I'm not saying that it's the exact same scenario, but they're a bigger team. Like their guards are bigger. Obviously, you kind of look at what they sport inside. In this game, Brennan's 6'10". So I think that's just what's interesting is they're not a huge team because they're not sporting 3 6'10" guys like Alabama or whatever, but their guards are bigger. They can be physical. And I think, again, that leads to the free throws is because they're always kind of in attack mode. You saw them, they'd get the ball and they just go last night. And, that's kind of one of the things where you look at, here's what I'm going to ask you. We talk about teams all year long where, the teams that give Alabama fits are the teams most like themselves. If you had to look at Grand Canyon, are they – obviously they don't – they're not like Alabama in that they get so much from the free throw line. But, is this team more like, and this is a bad comparison right now because A&M's shooting the three lights out, but, it does feel like they are an attacking team like A&M who wants to kind of push their way in there, force the fouls, like we said, which could be problematic for Alabama. I don't know if this team is, they're not like a Florida. They're not like a Kentucky. Teams like that have given Alabama issues just because of the way they get their points, I think is much different, even though they're still a good offensive team. And obviously, Grand Canyon, the numbers-wise, tells you they're a much better defensive team than any of those teams we just mentioned in the SEC with Florida and Kentucky. So,
well, it's a unique team. It's a unique makeup because their highest usage guy, their main guy, Tyon Grant Foster, at wing, he plays the three for them, is incredible. And he's 6'7". Their guy at the four, Gabe McLaughlin, is also 6'7", shoots 40% from three. And so they run almost all their offense through Grant Foster. So it's kind of unique where the featured piece is not the point guard or shooting guard. It's kind of the wing guys that handle the rock on most possessions. So it's interesting. And defensively, they really match up well since they have Grant Foster at the three. And he's not, how some guys, they'll be listed as 6'6", but they play more like 6'3". And then sometimes they're listed as 6'7", and they play more like 6'10". This Grant Foster guy's got a long wingspan, plays long. It kind of reminds me of just kind of the way defensively that Alabama could just pose the length issue to teams last year, where at the three, they'd always kind of have that length advantage. It's kind of what Grant Foster poses on the the smaller teams from the WAC. Hey, Ken Palm's got this as a 5-point game. I think the computers know what Grand Canyon does really well, which is force the action, force contact, That's what Alabama has struggled with. But then there's always that in the back of your mind, well, geez, Alabama could score 110 points.
Yeah.
You know?
I think rebounding is huge in this game because
Yeah.
Alabama, we know too, has been a team that can get the offensive rebounds because you know they're going to put up a lot of shots. You
Yep.
get a bunch of threes, so you're going to get those longer rebound opportunities. I think that's where Alabama has to be able to get some second chance points here. But Grand Canyon's also a good offensive rebounding team, and so I think you've got two teams here that can really clean up on the glass when it comes to getting second chance opportunities. I think that's where, especially like I mentioned for Alabama, you have guys that are bigger they play bigger maybe than what they actually are. You just mentioned that, like for Grand Canyon, and so they're going to have to rebound because
Yeah.
I think too it's like just when you watch Grand Canyon, it's just the energy and kind of feeding off the crowd and everything they did in that St. Mary's game. Like that's just they're a team that's riding a lot of confidence now, and I'll go back to it. This worked for Alabama last time when I brought up how dangerous their opponent could be. Using the Torvik momentum model here. 13th best team in the country since the calendar hit March. So, they're playing really well right now, Grand Canyon is. And so I think that's something where you look at it. Of course, you'll have familiarity with Bryce Drew based on his tenure at Vanderbilt when he was there. But, yeah, this is a little bit different because I think this is a team that's kind of mastered the way they want to play. And to me, it all comes down to if Alabama gets the shots they want, they should win this game. I don't want to say comfortably, but if they're getting the shots they want, they should be fine here. Which again, sometimes we look at the numbers right, and you have to just kind of use them within the context of the conference the teams played in. Grand Canyon beat San Diego State earlier in the year. They lost that game to South Carolina. They beat San Francisco. I mean, beyond that, really, other than the St. Mary's win, right? We can only take the games they played against the opponents they played. So it's hard to just completely compare, but I do think this is a team that can give Alabama some problems, but to me, it's like if Alabama is playing the way they played against Charleston, if they have 10 guys, which I know the numbers, the minutes distribution upped a little bit because the game was out of hand, but if you saw all those guys, right, whether it's Wagi, whether it's Diabate, Stevenson, all the big guys kind of stepping up and adding minutes and kind of getting into a rhythm, that could be important here when you talk about just the depth that Alabama has. Because on the flip side of that, Grand Canyon, not really a team they're going to go 7 deep basically, right? So if Alabama can get a lot of good stuff out of the bench, that also sets up an interesting spot here. So we'll make our picks, but 5-point game by KenPom, that tells you something. So
yeah, this is going to be a good game. You ready for picks?
I'm ready.
All right. On my bracket, I was all in on this Grand Canyon team. I had them Sweet 16. And they're dangerous. Don't get me wrong. They are dangerous. But I think they got the matchup they wanted in the first game. They get a team from not they get a West Coast team. And they get a team that's down a player, Josh Jefferson. If you're familiar with Gonzaga more than St. Mary's, Anton Watson. That's what Jefferson is for St. Mary's. Huge piece for them, and he's out. So they catch a shorthanded St. Mary's team that plays slow. They were losing for a little bit of the first half, got out to that lead early in the second half, didn't look back. Now they've got to play a complete opposite team. The complete opposite team. Complete opposite. Average possession length for St. Mary's is 20.3. That is the third slowest offensive tempo in the nation. For Alabama, 14.4, second fastest. In one day, Grand Canyon has to go from playing the third slowest to the second fastest team in the nation. Talk about a quick turnaround. Not enough time to prepare. Alabama's finally healthy, coming off a great shooting night. Give me the Tide.
Yeah, I think you bring up a good point. How many teams have successfully been able to slow Alabama down this year or not play into the way that Alabama wants to play? I think that's the thing, right? And the teams that have been successful are the Kentuckys, the Floridas, the teams that really want to play exactly like that. And that's where I think Grand Canyon, you can look at the numbers and say, okay, they maybe want to get up and down a bit, but this is a different level, and we talk about that every single time. Where, and it is the preparation aspect. Like, that's a great point. You go from playing two completely different teams, and that's hard to kind of turn around and completely be able to kind of fix a game plan that is going to be almost the opposite of what you had the previous time around. And so that's what we talk about when we say the NCAA tournament's about matchups.
Yep.
It's about not just, okay, you have your first matchup, then you advance. How can you use what you used in the first game into the second game? I don't think there's much of anything that Grand Canyon can use from this first game to the second game. And so that could be a little bit concerning. Meanwhile, Alabama's going to do what Alabama always does. They're going to go out, they're going to force you to play the way they want to play. And if Alabama's hitting shots, I think that this one could be, it's not going to be a Charleston game, don't get me wrong, because I think Grand Canyon has proven to be a better team. But we've seen this with Alabama before. If you get this team that all of a sudden has found their way three-point shooting-wise, they are going to put you in a rough spot. And so I'm picking Alabama here too. Not that I don't think this Grand Canyon team has something to it, because we were talking about Grand Canyon. Like you said, you picked them to the Sweet 16 in your bracket. We were talking about this team going into the tournament as like, as like I'd go on some radio stuff and everybody every week's like, who are the teams that people aren't talking about? I'm like, I wouldn't want to see Grand Canyon if I'm anybody, because we see what Bryce Drew's done there. This is just a tremendous team. They're going to defend, but there is a difference between the two opponents that they're playing here, St. Mary's, Alabama. And yeah, I think the Tide can really, if they force this game to be played the way they want it to be played, I don't necessarily like that for Grand Canyon. And I think it sets up nicely for a full strength Alabama team. Whereas, like I mentioned, if they'd have played this game a couple weeks ago, maybe things are a bit different in terms of how we look at the matchup. But if Alabama's got everybody available, I just think, that they can shoot anybody out of the gym in terms of their three-point shooting. So I'm picking Alabama too in this one. So not an official Southeastern 14 kiss of death, because Chris isn't here to preview this one. So, but Max and I are going to go with the Tide on this one. But as always, guys, we appreciate you. Yeah,
before we end, Blake, I think I said it about Rain Smith. I think I said it about Golke. I was just saying, like, hey, if you guys haven't watched them before, just kind of expect this from them, okay? Number 7 on Grand Canyon, if you have not watched them. Number 7 is projected to go in the second round of the NBA draft, and he's 24 years old. Just know that going in. So when you turn on the TV and you're like, who the heck is this number 7 guy? He's a 24-year-old NBA prospect for Grand Canyon. Just know that going in.
This is a very good team. And I think the crowd part of this, if you didn't stay up late and watch that St. Mary's game, like, that was a Grand Canyon home game. And so I'm sure a lot of Alabama fans in attendance were there to see that. But they're going to have a lot of momentum. They're going to have a lot of confidence coming into this game. And as we always say, Alabama, if they're not playing defense, they can't overlook anybody. I don't care who it is, and especially not a team that's advanced to the round of 32. So Alabama's got to defend for starters, but I think offensively they can get this game the way they want it, and maybe that winds up being the difference here for the Crimson Tide. So there you go. There are thoughts on Alabama versus Grand Canyon. Check out everything else on the channel. Hit that subscribe button. We're previewing all the games for the SEC teams remaining in the NCAA tournament. So check it out there. A lot more stuff on the way here as we go through the offseason. We'll have SEC football, baseball, all that covered as well. So we appreciate you guys watching, and we'll talk to you again here soon at Southeastern 14.